Welcome to the relay where we're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Well, apparently, Badou Jack has added Jonathan Banks as his new trainer. Is the same Jonathan Banks who's worked with anyone from Vladimir Klitschko to Cecilia Brækhus. Currently, he's still working with Gennady Golovkin. And moving forward, he's going to be in the corner of Badou Jack. One is left to wonder if this endeavor, this new partnership, will be a fruitful partnership for Badou Jack, because Badou Jack, he's always been a solid fighter. He's always had a good balance of offense and defense, and for some reason, he's always come up short. And at approximately 36, could be 37, by the time that boxing is back in full swing.
Right.
36, maybe 37 years old. Is it too little, too late when it comes to Badou Jack, who's currently campaigning in the light heavyweight division? Is there enough there left to salvage? Because as far as implementation, the technical aspect of the sport, Badou Jack's never been missing much.
He's always been technically sound.
I mean, he hasn't. As far as being a technically sound boxer, the kind of boxer that has a good balance of both offense and defense, Badou Jack's never actually been missing very much. And in the realm of being a physical specimen, based on what we have seen so far, Badou Jack has proven himself to be a durable, tough as nails kind of fighter. These things in mind, at the age of 36, could be 37 by the time boxing is back in full swing. What's Jonathan Banks supposed to add to Badou Jack's repertoire?
What?
I had these same kind of questions when I heard that Gennady Golovkin joined forces with Jonathan Banks. It was a question of, at this stage in this fighter's career, this fighter having been through all the different things that he has been through, what can come of this partnership? What can be added to a Gennady Golovkin's repertoire? Same applies here with Badou Jack. Badou, having been through everything that he's been through, what can Jonathan add to his
repertoire? Je ne sais pas.
The bane of Badou Jack always seems to have been that perhaps he takes a little bit too long to get into a groove, get into a rhythm, start getting into the fight. I mean, I do happen to think that if anything has costed him over the years, it would be that. But I think that has less to do with Badou Jack's technical abilities or the state of him physically. I think that has less to do with that and more to do with the psychology of the fighter. Not really sure what Jonathan Banks is supposed to do to correct that. That if there were anything to correct, if there were anything that needed working on, that would have to be it. That Badou Jack, he's got to make more of an effort in those early rounds, because it seems like it's what happens or what doesn't happen in those early rounds that has costed him in the past. So look, is the state of the fighter that requires consideration? Is it too little, too late for Badou Jack? There's that to consider, but there's also the state of the division. Badou Jack, he's a PBC fighter for all intents and purposes, under the Mayweather Promotions banner, but better still, he's a PBC guy. And the biggest fights the division has to offer are not on the PBC side of the street. That's just reality. That's just the truth of it. 2 of the 4 world titles are on the top-ranked side of things. The IBF and WBC titles, which are in possession of Artur
Beterbiev.
The WBA title, that rests with Dimitri Bivol, who's on the Matchroom DAZN side of things, and the WBO title remains vacant after Canelo Alvarez took it from Sergey Kovalev, then threw it in the air and headed in another direction. Might feel so inclined to think that, that vacant WBO title, that's probably a guy like Badou Jack's best bet to become a full-fledged world champion at this weight. That, nobody's holding it right now. The most dangerous 2 guys in the division really are Artur Beterbiev and Dimitri Bivol. You'd be hard-pressed to win a world title from one of them, but the WBO, it just so happens to be vacant. Is it possible that what Badou Jack is trying to do is get himself ready for what could be a world title run? Is that possible? I don't know. I mean, he's a PBC guy, right?
Right.
We all know how much the PBC loves the WBO as an organization, right?
Right.
It was a tournament proposed by the WBO for 4 light heavyweight contenders within their ranked standings to contest for what is still the vacant WBO title. Zurdo Ramirez was supposed to be one of those contenders, but he decided to go the other way. Is it possible that maybe Badou Jack might line himself up for just such an opportunity? I'm speculating. I am. But one must reconcile why Badou Jack chose to bring on a new trainer, a change of ambiance, a change of any kind. At what, 36? Could be 37 years old by the time boxing resumes? He's doing this for what exactly? Is he doing this to have what? A Jean Pascal rematch?
Is that it?
A Marcus Brown rematch? You're bringing on a new trainer for those guys? Is that it?
Is that it?
Is that the end game? Is that the cause of the change? A round robin with those same two guys for what is a baby belt? Not even a full-fledged world title, a baby belt, the lesser version of Dmitry Bivol's belt. Is that what this is all for?
What is it for?
Look, you gotta be realistic. Badou Jack is 36 going on 37 years old, right? That basically means he's approaching the end. That basically means he is nearing the end of his career. And what this move accents, what it denotes, is that he might have one last hoorah in mind. And I'm wondering if that last hoorah is supposed to be for a WBA baby belt?
Really?
Rematches with those two guys? Is that what it's all about? Is that what it's all for? I don't know. Can't call it. I mean, he's got to be doing this for a reason, right? So what's the reason? What does the immediate future hold for Badou Jack moving forward? He's already been there and done that with a lot of people. What's the end game here? I don't know, but we'll be monitoring this situation as it evolves and as it develops. In heavyweight news, per a tweet from Michael Benson, Anthony Joshua on Dillian Whyte. I know he's been chasing a world title shot. I offered him a shot last year. He refused it. Maybe he wants his hands on the WBC once I've beaten Fury. Whyte can come and get this work as well. It will be one-sided. And that is yet another conversation that is going to have to be had somewhere down the line. Oh, granted that many things must come to pass before it becomes about Anthony Joshua versus Dillian Whyte II. But it is an interesting proposition because both of these fighters, they have shown growth. They have added things to their repertoire, since they locked horns all those years ago.
They have.
Dillian Whyte, he's shown more of a layered approach in that fight with Oscar Rivas.
He outboxed him.
Some time ago, Dillian Whyte would have been best characterized as a come-forward pressure fighter / volume puncher. I mean, that really was what was more akin to Dillian Whyte's characteristics, his implementation, than the fighter that stands before us here today. Dillian Whyte has developed quite a jab. He's still got that good left hand of his, that good left hook.
Yeah.
But he has grown. He's more than what he was when he fought Anthony Joshua. But the same is true of Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua has shown that he can be more than a towering set of muscles with some boxing acumen. He showed that he's more than just a boxer-puncher. He can play the pure boxer when the situation calls for it, when it is appropriate to do so. Anthony Joshua, like Dillian Whyte, is more than what he was then when they fought. So in a second fight, what do we see? Will it be a repeat or will it be revenge for Dillian Whyte? You know, I think about Dillian Whyte's performance against Oscar Rivas. As I stated, it was a more layered approach than what you're used to seeing, or what you were used to seeing from Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte heavily employed the jab and shut Oscar Rivas out, offsetting his aggression by sticking and moving and fighting behind the left hand. Very interesting, because I don't think that Dillian Whyte would have that same luck against Anthony Joshua. I don't see Dillian Whyte winning the jabbing contest against that fighter, because that fighter has different physical dimensions than an Oscar Rivas. You know, Oscar Rivas, he's not small for the weight, but he's not big either. Not in terms of frame, stature, length. He's not a long, rangy fighter the way that Anthony Joshua, when he wants to be, can be a long, rangy fighter. And because he's really not a long, rangy fighter, he's that much more susceptible to Dillian Whyte's jab. It's easier to keep him out because he can't box from the outside the way that Anthony Joshua could. So if it were to turn into a jabbing contest, I think that would favor Anthony Joshua. And this isn't said in any way, shape, or form to diminish Dillian Whyte's victory over Oscar Rivas, make it sound like it was easy. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that every single fighter that's out there has different physical dimensions, different characteristics, and this is what they bring to the table. That's what tells you the story of how the fight is going to look, or how the fight looked. That Oscar Rivas is not the biggest, most statuesque guy in the heavyweight division. He's not one of those kinds of fighters. and he's a mid-range to inside guy, so if you box from the outside employing the left hand, you will effectively shut him out. That's the way you go about fighting him. The way you go about fighting an Anthony Joshua, it's got to be something entirely different because he's entirely different from Oscar Rivas. I think that Dillian, in a rematch, would have to try to make a return to being a pressure fighter, to trying to close the gap on Anthony Joshua, go to his body, go up top, try to land a big left hook.
Try to.
But if Dillian were to make a return to being a pressure fighter, doesn't that then mean that the second fight would work out the way that the first fight did? That if you become more like the fighter than you were then, won't it cost you now the way it did before?
Might.
It's an interesting proposition. It's an interesting question that at some point might require an answer. We're a ways out from that, though. We are. I mean, in order for that to happen, Joshua's got to make it past Pulev. Fury's got to make it past Wilder for a third time. Then Fury's got to fight Joshua, and then Joshua's got to make it past him, be in possession of the green belt to thereby set the precedence for the Dillian-Whyte rematch. Because lest we forget, Dillian-Whyte's title shot, it is coming by way of the WBC. It's coming by way of the green belt. And Anthony Joshua, he's going to have to be in possession of it in order to set the precedence for the second fight. It's funny because Dillian-Whyte walked away from the chance to fight Anthony Joshua for a second time on the premise that he didn't like the money. If you compare the marquee value of both of these fighters from the time they first locked horns with each other till now, the both of them have created solid fan bases domestically. They have. Dillian-Whyte has fans. I wouldn't say he has as many fans as Anthony Joshua does, but all the same, there are lots of people out there in the United Kingdom that'll pay for a night of Dillian-Whyte's boxing. The same is true of Anthony Joshua, of course. And it's the funniest thing because Dillian-Whyte received a lot of criticism for having walked away from the opportunity to fight Anthony Joshua for a second time. But if things work out the way they can work out, he might actually end up making a lot more fucking money. The rematch happens in 2021 as opposed to if it would have happened in 2019. Dillian-Whyte bet on himself when he walked away from that rematch. And in some ways, he cleaned up.
Worked out so far.
He won. Don't underestimate the value of this domestic affair on the premise of it being domestic. A lot of things have happened. A lot of time has passed since the first fight. This has all the ingredients to be a bigger moneymaker now than the first fight was before. Make no mistake, there's an audience, a sizable audience out there that'd be willing to see Joshua versus White 2. Except this time, unlike before, it could be for all the belts, all the marbles. So if you ask me, Dillian-Whyte made the right decision in 2019, walking away from the potential second fight, the rematch. Did he do the right thing? Kinda looks like he did. And finally, just in keeping with the theme of Anthony Joshua and things going on in the heavyweight division, it's about time for me to address his recent comments in reference to Deontay Wilder that Deontay's a bitch and he's more of a man. Oh yeah. I went into my drawer and I pulled out my long list of things to say. I've got a lot of things to say about Wilder, but you don't knock a man when he's down. Also, and that was at the top of the list. I have to stand by those principles. Joshua told SI Boxing Podcast with Chris Mannix.
He's a Mannix, on the floor.
What the fuck was that?
Musical interlude. But Joshua went on to say, but for sure, I think me and Wilder, as I say, are cut from a different cloth. He's what we call, it begins with a B and ends with an H. I'm not like that. I'm more of a man. I don't really get on the internet talking crap. The only times you've seen me talking recklessly is against Dillian-Whyte and Jarrell Miller. Other than that, I'm an ambassador for the sport. I'm trying to be clean, representing my sponsorships, representing DAZN properly. I try to stay away from the typical stereotype of a heavyweight boxer. It's difficult, but I have it in me to fire up and talk recklessly when needed. Now, whether or not you think that Wilder's a bitch or has behaved like a bitch, that's up to you. That's open to interpretation. That all depends on what you classify as bitch ass, bitch assness, that kind of behavior. That all depends on you, the individual. From where I'm sitting, the most that I can say about Wilder's behavior is that it's really not in keeping with that of a competitor's behavior. Immediately after Anthony Joshua lost the first fight to Andy Ruiz, you will have noticed that Deontay Wilder was one of the first people that took to social media celebrating, talking all kinds of shit. And the whole time I'm wondering, why are you so happy about this? Anthony Joshua, he's supposed to be your Lex Luthor, your Joker, your Mandarin, your Magneto. He is to be your arch nemesis in this era of heavyweight boxing. And rather than kicking yourself that someone beat you to the punch, that someone got to him before you did, rather than kicking yourself that it wasn't you that defeated him but someone else, you're celebrating?
Why are you so happy?
If anything, you should be furious. That is, if you're a competitor. That is, if your intention was to be the one to defeat this man, to expose him to the boxing community for what he really is. That is, if you actually ever had any intention of fighting this man, you wouldn't be happy that someone beat you to him. You'd be upset. But Wilder was anything but upset. He relished the opportunity to talk down Anthony Joshua, to try to say he told us so when, hey, you know what, instead of telling us so, you could have showed us. And it seems like Wilder didn't really want to show us. He was focused on other things. It kind of gives you the impression that, if anything, he was relieved that someone finally beat Anthony Joshua. Even if it wasn't him, he was relieved. At least in that moment, he felt he was exonerated of that expectation, that responsibility. Truth, classifying another individual as some kind of a bitch all depends on what you characterize as bitch-assness. I'd have to say that it's not exactly very masculine to say that you want to get pregnant by your girlfriend. I mean, I can think of a couple of more manly things to say than that about your girlfriend, your wife, or your significant other, than I want to be impregnated by her. I don't think that Wilder's shown much strength of character over the years. The way he handled the situation with Anthony Joshua, the loss to Andy Ruiz, what he immediately took to doing thereafter. Now, as the universe would have it, the tables have strangely turned for Deontay Wilder, haven't they? I mean, when Anthony Joshua lost that fight, Deontay Wilder immediately wrote him off. Immediately. Saying that it was over for him, his career was over, he's irrelevant, he's not going to win the second fight, he's going to lose the second fight the same way he lost the first fight. This is all stuff that Wilder was saying right after. And he took pleasure in saying it when really you would expect a competitor to regret not being the one to beat Anthony Joshua. Wilder didn't look like he regretted anything. It looked like he was breathing a sigh of relief, and he was in a perpetual state of celebration. The kind of state you really don't expect a competitor to be in when his arch nemesis has been bested by someone else, and you're happy about that. Even now, Anthony Joshua is giving Wilder, extending it to him, the courtesy that Wilder himself deprived Anthony Joshua of, not but a few months ago. Anthony Joshua's not going in on Wilder the way that Wilder went in on Anthony Joshua, because Anthony Joshua doesn't have to, and in that way, he's showing the strength of character that Wilder didn't. He's showing that he's a bigger man, more of a man than Wilder is, as he's not given to whatever impulse strikes him in the moment. He's not a slave to it. He exhibits all the maturation that makes a man a man. Whereas Wilder, he's a little boy throwing his toys out of prom. That's the look of it. That if Anthony Joshua behaves in opposition of how Wilder behaves, and Anthony Joshua acts more like a man than Wilder does, I guess the conclusion would be that Wilder acts more like a bitch than a man would. Make of that what you will.